My name is Riley Monroe, and the day my life shifted wasn't marked by thunder or tears. It began with the sound of a zipper. My mom dragged my suitcase across the driveway like she was taking out the trash, her breath sharp in the morning air. "Your brother's wife needs the room," she said, not even looking at me. I watched her pop the suitcase open and toss my clothes into a plastic bin like she was sorting recyclables. And something in me went very, very still. I didn't beg. I didn't ask why. Jake stood by the porch holding his phone, pretending not to see me flinch when my uniform shoes hit the concrete. "Don't make this dramatic," he muttered, and Amber leaned on the doorway, arms crossed, already imagining the space as her studio. My mother only added, "You're an adult now. You'll figure it out." I looked at the house where I'd lived my whole life and realized I was already invisible inside it. The air smelled like burnt toast from the diner's morning rush. My laptop sat in the corner of the suitcase, one cracked corner catching the light. I closed the lid carefully and said the only thing that felt true: "You'll miss me when you need me." No one answered. They turned back toward the house as if I'd been erased. I picked up my bag and walked away, every step heavier than the last, but steady. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I just kept walking toward the street, thinking about every password, every login, every platform I'd built from nothing. They thought they had taken everything from me. What they didn't know was that I'd left them one last gift, a quiet little secret they wouldn't notice until it was too late. Nina opened the door before I even knocked. Hair tied up, eyes wide. She didn't ask what happened. She just stepped aside and said, "Take my bed. I'll take the couch." The sound of her voice cracked something in me I didn't know was still holding. By the time I set my bags down, the weight of everything I'd lost hit like static in my chest. But I kept my face calm. The next morning, sunlight leaked through thin blinds and painted the small apartment gold. I sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the chipped paint on the wall, and whispered, "I don't have a home." Nina walked in with 2 mugs of instant coffee, handed me one, and said, "Then we build one from scratch." Her tone wasn't pity, it was a promise. That afternoon, while she was at her shift at the cafe, I opened my laptop and began listing every account tied to the Maple House: the diner's Instagram, website, delivery portals, all under my email, my passwords, my work. I didn't delete anything, didn't lock them out, just took back what was mine. They said I didn't deserve to be there. I murmured, fingers flying across the keyboard. So now they can see how it feels to run without me. Action. When Nina came home that night, she found me surrounded by notes and open tabs. She leaned against the door and asked, "What's the plan?" I told her. "To make something real. Not revenge. Just freedom." She smiled in that knowing way and said, "Freedom sounds like revenge to people who can't stand losing control." I laughed for the first time that day, soft and tired. Later, I checked my savings barely enough to survive a couple of months if I was careful. Nina didn't hesitate. "We'll make it work," she said. I believed her. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars humming, people rushing, and for the first time, I felt it too. The world hadn't ended. It had just shifted without me, waiting for me to catch up. Nina mentioned that Urban Poor was looking for someone to handle their marketing. Her eyes bright as she said, "You built a whole brand once. Riley, you can do it again." I hesitated, staring at the half-finished latte in my hand. "They won't take me seriously," I said. But she just smiled. "Then make them." The next morning, she sent my resume to her manager without waiting for my answer. And by noon, I had an interview scheduled. Ethan Ross, the general manager, met me in a corner booth surrounded by plants and quiet jazz. He skimmed through my portfolio, tapping a finger against one of the charts. "You grew this page from 0 to 30,000 followers?" I nodded. "How?" he asked, his tone even. Curious. I told him about consistency, timing, and listening to people instead of selling to them. He leaned back and asked, "What's your biggest failure?" For a moment, I almost said losing my home, but I caught myself and answered, "Staying where I wasn't respected." Ethan studied me for a beat, then said, "Then you're already ahead of most people." Something in the way he said it made me exhale for the first time in weeks. I didn't realize how heavy the silence had become until it started to lift. He offered me the part-time position before I could even ask about the pay. When I told Nina that night, she grinned and threw a towel over her shoulder. "See? I told you. The world just needed to see you outside their shadow." I smiled back, still unsure if I deserved the relief flooding through me. "It's just part-time," I said quietly. "Then make it full-time," she replied. And for the first time since that driveway, I believed I could. Amber announced her plan over dinner, her voice bright, like she'd just solved the world's problems. "The Maple House needs a full makeover," she said. "White walls, new signage, influencer energy." Jake nodded as if it were gospel. Helen, exhausted but eager to believe in something, asked, "And how much will all this cost?" Amber waved a manicured hand. "About 10,000. Think of it as an investment in visibility." I imagined that conversation easily because I'd heard versions of it my entire life, people mistaking noise for strategy. At Urban Poor, I built campaigns that didn't rely on filters or trends, just community. Ethan glanced at my notes and said, "You make it look simple," I told him. "That's because I learned what not to do." He smiled. "Then you've learned faster than most." We were planning our first Morning Muse event, soft jazz, a specialty brew, a theme that made people want to linger. It was everything the Maple House used to be before my family turned it into a stage. Nina stopped by my desk one afternoon with her phone in hand. "You've seen this, right?" she said, showing me a clip Amber had posted. Pouting beside a half-painted wall, the caption read, "Grand rebrand in progress." I laughed under my breath. "She's turning the diner into a backdrop." Nina shook her head. "Your mom really thinks this will save them." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The numbers would answer soon enough. By the end of the week, our event sold out before noon. Customers tagged Urban Poor in their photos, calling it the place to be. Ethan stopped beside me, scrolling through the stats. "You did all this at your mom's diner, didn't you?" I nodded once. "More or less," I said. And he replied, "Then this is just the beginning." 2. That night, I sat with Nina at our small table, scrolling through the diner's page. Engagement had dropped. Captions riddled with typos. Comments ignored. Nina frowned. "They're falling apart." I sipped my coffee and said, "They wanted modern. They got it, just not the kind they expected." She tilted her head. "You ever think about going back?" I smiled faintly. "No, I'm already ahead." And for the first time, I knew it was true. By the third week, Urban Poor's numbers were climbing faster than any of us expected. Ethan leaned over my screen one morning, eyes scanning the dashboard. "This can't be right," he said, watching the graph spike upward. I told him it was. "People don't just want coffee," I said. "They want to feel seen." He nodded, half smiling. "Then you're giving them exactly that." The data didn't lie, the campaign was working. And every empty table in my mother's diner was part of the proof. Nina joined me during a slow afternoon, balancing a tray of cold brew samples. "Guess who came by Urban Pour today?" she asked. I looked up. "One of your old regulars," said. "The Maple House feels different now, too loud." "Too fake." I let out a quiet laugh. "That's what happens when you trade warmth for Wi-Fi." She laughed too. But there was sympathy behind it. "You're not even touching them. And they're still unraveling," she said. I shrugged. "Gravity's doing the work." Later that night, my phone buzzed with a familiar name. Helen's email read, "We can't access our page. Send the login. Madison wants to post." I stared at it for a full minute before typing back. "Those accounts belong to my business. You can make your own." There was no anger in the words. Just finality. Nina glanced over my shoulder. "That's it?" she asked. I nodded. "That's it." She grinned. "Cold. I like it." I didn't tell her it wasn't cold, it was clarity. When I shut my laptop, the city outside hummed with neon and traffic. And, for the first time, I felt aligned with it. The world kept moving. And now I was part of the motion again. The numbers didn't lie. Neither did the silence that followed. Amber's latest idea hit social media before reality could stop her. "We're opening a wellness corner," she said in her video, gesturing at the unfinished garage. "Sauna. Skincare. Private sessions. It's going to elevate the brand." Jake stood behind her, nodding like a silent investor, while Helen commented heart emojis under the post. I watched it once, then closed my phone. Nina caught my expression and asked, "They're still spending?" I nodded. "They're mistaking ambition for oxygen." The next week, Jake lost his job after leaving work early to help film another video. Helen tried to hold things together, calling vendors, delaying payments, pretending it was temporary. Amber didn't notice. She was too busy filming behind-the-scenes clips about transformation. Nina slid into the booth across from me during lunch and said, "They're running on fumes." I didn't look up from my laptop. "No," I said. "They're running on pride. It's..." That night, my phone rang. Helen's voice was thin and strained. "You don't understand what family means," she said. Words sharp with accusation. I kept my tone steady. "No. I understand perfectly. It means I build. You take. And I apologize for both." She inhaled hard. "You're being cruel." I answered. "I'm being clear." Then I ended the call before she could turn guilt into another task for me to fix. By the end of the month, customers at Urban Pour started whispering about the Maple House. They argued right in front of everyone. One woman told me, stirring her coffee, that influencer girl was yelling about money. I thanked her politely. Pretending I didn't know them, Nina met my eyes across the counter and mouthed, "Karma." I didn't smile back. There was nothing satisfying about watching the people who raised you fall apart. Only the quiet realization that the collapse had begun long before I left. The spiral wasn't punishment, it was consequence. The pounding started before sunrise, sharp and desperate against my apartment door. I checked the peephole and saw Helen, Jake, and Amber standing there with bags at their feet. Helen's voice cracked through the wood. "Riley, please. We need to talk," Jake added. "We lost the house. The diner, everything. Just let us in." I kept my hand on the deadbolt, my pulse steady. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Though I already knew. Helen's words tumbled out fast. "We made mistakes. We didn't mean for it to go this far." I heard Jake mutter, "You don't understand what it's like out there." Amber's mascara streaked down her face as she whispered, "You ruined us. You took everything." I almost laughed. "No," I said quietly. "You did that when you spent more on ring lights than payroll." Helen's breath hitched. We're family. Oh. I unlocked the chain just enough for them to see my face. Then you should have acted like one, I said. Helen stepped forward. But I didn't move. You told me I didn't deserve a room, I continued. Now you know what it feels like to be on the other side of that door. Jake's voice rose, frustration spilling into anger. You think this is justice? You think watching us suffer makes you better? I met his glare. No. Jake. It makes me free. It's... Helen started to cry. The sound rough and unfamiliar. Please, she whispered. The landlord took everything. We have nowhere else to go. You can help us rebuild. You always could. My phone was already in my hand. I'm done rebuilding things that were never mine, I said. When the dispatcher answered, my voice didn't shake. Hi. There are people outside my door refusing to leave. I'm alone and don't feel safe. Helen stared at me, disbelieving. You're calling the police on your own, mother? I looked at her one last time. No. Mom, I'm calling for peace. Action. The sirens reached the block minutes later, their reflection flashing blue and red across the hallway walls. The officers spoke calmly, asking them to leave. Helen's shoulders slumped. I'm still your mother, she said as she passed me. I held her gaze. And I'm still the daughter you threw away. The door closed softly behind them, and the silence that followed was cleaner than forgiveness. The new urban pour opened on a bright Saturday morning, sunlight pouring through the same windows where I used to wipe fingerprints off as a kid. The floors gleamed. The air smelled like roasted beans and new beginnings. Ethan stood beside me, adjusting his tie. You ready for this? He asked. I smiled. I've been ready since the day they threw my suitcase on the driveway. The doors opened, and people flooded in, laughing, ordering, filling the space that once belonged to my past. A woman at the counter tilted her head and said, Isn't this where that old diner used to be? I nodded. It was, I replied. But now it's something better. She smiled and lifted her cup in a quiet toast before walking away. The moment felt like closure disguised as small talk. Ethan handed me the first printed sales report by noon. Numbers already breaking projections. You did this, he said. I shook my head. No, we did. I just stopped letting the wrong people take the credit. Later that week, I heard through Nina that Helen was working at a chain restaurant on the edge of town. Jake was doing delivery shifts, and Amber had disappeared from social media altogether. I didn't feel triumph. Just distance, the kind that finally lets you breathe. Nina leaned on the counter during closing and said, So, how does it feel? I looked around at the lights. The quiet hum of the espresso machine. The clean slate I had built. It feels like the first time I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, I said. She nodded. Then it was worth it. And I realized she was right. The real revenge wasn't winning, it was finally living without needing to. I stayed late after closing. The cafe quiet except for the hum of the lights and the soft scrape of my pen on paper. I was drafting a mentorship plan for the younger baristas, teaching them the things no one had taught me, how to build something that couldn't be taken away. Nina locked up and asked, Still working? I smiled without looking up. Always, I said. When she left, I leaned back and watched the city move outside the glass, realizing justice didn't always come loud or cruel. Sometimes it arrived quietly, in the form of peace that finally stayed. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. If you've ever been pushed aside, told you were too much or not enough, I hope you heard something in this that felt like strength. Don't wait for permission to start again. Subscribe for more stories that remind you why you should.